Welcome to the Tiny House Talk Show, a place where all things from inside and around the tiny house industry are discussed by tiny house professionals as well as accomplished and aspiring DIY tiny house builders. This episode of the Tiny House Talk Show is brought to you by the tiny house experts at TrailerMade Custom Trailers. TrailerMade has led the tiny house industry for over a decade by building trailers, steel frames, and tiny house shell kits for the professional and DIYer alike. TrailerMade, built for a lifetime. Welcome back to the Tiny House Talk Show. In this episode, we're speaking to the owner and founder of Simblissity Tiny Homes, Byron Fears. Natalie had a moment to sit down with Byron about a week and a half ago. We promised you this episode last week, but after an epic faceplant with my new podcasting skills, the audio file was kind of a bust. So we reached out to some friends, got it sort of salvaged, and saved a really great conversation with two industry leaders, Natalie and Byron.
Oh, yes. We are bringing to you, as expected and promised, his 5 biggest mistakes that he wants to make sure tiny house builders avoid.
5 biggest mistakes to avoid as a DIY tiny house builder, huh?
Mm-hmm.
I've honestly, this will be the first time I've heard the interview.
It's great.
I've not had a chance, so I'm pretty excited.
Fantastic information.
You guys are going to hear it with me together, so I'm pretty tickled.
Yeah.
So I'd say without further ado, what do you say we roll into it, huh?
Yeah.
Let's hear what you and Byron got to chat about.
Sounds awesome. Welcome, Byron, to the Tiny Home Show. Hi.
Hi there.
Hi. So we wanted to start with you and have you be our first guest because you were the instrumental part of bringing us into the tiny house world. You walked through our doors and invited us into the tiny house world with you. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and please just give us your gut reactions, general feelings, and share with us just, I don't know, your thoughts. So first question is, how did you get started in the tiny house industry? And I know you're very passionate about it. So that's kind of what I would like to hear about today.
Okay, well, basically, Dot and I retired a long time ago. And when the Great Recession happened, all of our money went away, all of our retirement funds. So we started buying houses and doing extensive functional art projects, pardon me. And we were remodeling houses. Mm-hmm. And we did that during the recession for a few years. And one day I go, we are out of alignment with our purpose in life. Mm. You know, the great American dream was proved to be unsustainable back during the recession.
Yes.
You know, the 3-bedroom house, 2-car garage, 2.35 children. It just proved out to not be what could continue. Mm-hmm. So I decided I didn't want to keep throwing lots of materials into the dumpster when we were remodeling houses, didn't want to use lots of resources. Mm-hmm. So the tiny house vision popped up back when Jay Schaefer built his house. And I saw this and I go, wow, this is an alignment. Mm-hmm. You know, our housing costs here in Colorado have gotten insane and people can't afford to buy houses. I wanted to provide a house that people could afford, that was built more sustainably and would set them up for a sustainable lifestyle. So basically we adopted the motto of wanting to save the planet one tiny home at a time.
I love that.
And that's where the passion was born.
Nice. And then you walked into our shop and you were looking for something pretty important to start that journey.
Back in those days, there were very few tiny home builders. Another big professional and I figured out there might have been 10 serious tiny home builders in the country when we started. And I could only locate 2 companies that would build tiny home trailers.
Wow.
And I was totally out of agreement with their design. So I walked into your shop and you folks agreed to be basically a crash test dummy and build our first tiny home trailer. And I explained to Damon and you that I was extremely demanding and I wanted things certain ways. And agreement was made.
Yeah.
So the trailer manifested quite quickly. And I remember when I went to pick it up, Damon goes, I'll never, won't say the word, do that again. It was so much work. Well, look what happened.
Yeah.
You're now the biggest tiny home trailer dealer in the whole country and built the best trailer and the best movable foundation.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
It's been quite the journey, and I think that anybody in the tiny house world would say that for all tiny housers, it is a journey, and it's not just a journey for them. I mean, it's been a journey for you, it's a journey for us, and I love that. You know, there's emotional parts to it. You get emotionally attached. You know, when we were building other trailers, not that they're not fun to build or important to build, but that you don't have that emotional attachment like you do with the tiny housers, who I refer to as the picky eaters of the world, which I can say with all the love in my heart because I'm one of them. I'm definitely a picky eater person in this world. And we want what we want, and you want it right. You want it done a very specific way. And there's nothing wrong with that. So, okay, question 2.
If I may.
Please, yes, absolutely.
So when someone comes to us and wants a tiny, we go through an extensive interview. I tell them I want to know the cool things about them, the weird things, the perversions, what their diet is as a picky eater.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what do they do throughout the day, on the weekends, at nighttime?
Mm-hmm.
I want to build a tiny home for them, not a tiny house.
Right.
So it is a very personal thing. You know, when people are buying a house, a regular house, they walk in this box, they spend 15 or 20 minutes and they go, this might work.
Mm-hmm.
So they buy a house and try and turn it into a home.
Right.
Tiny homes, people spend months thinking about it and planning, if not years.
Yes.
And it's, like you said, it's extremely personal.
Yes, it is. And sometimes that journey for them, it is really long. You know, we have a customer right now that, you know, we've been working with since 2021, and just, you know, 2 days ago, put the deposit in. So we meet these tiny housers wherever they're at on that timeline, that time frame for them. Sometimes we don't know. Sometimes they're right at the beginning. They know nothing about tiny houses, and sometimes they're really close to like being ready to go. So I always feel like it's our job to kind of figure out where they're at on that timeline. And I hear you saying it's just as important for them to figure out if living tiny is in line with what they want. If they can, I think it's probably similar to maybe people who think they can go retire and live in another country and think have this kind of idealistic view of it, but then they get there and it doesn't work. We don't want that ever for a tiny houser, for them to get into that situation and hate it, or for it to not feel right, or for not to work out. So I love that you're asking those questions and that you're figuring that out right at the very beginning with them. I think that's super important.
It's the most important factor to start out with.
Yeah.
You know, that's why we have extensive interviews. We've had couples have come in and they had no agreement whatsoever about what they wanted as a tiny home.
Wow.
We've had people that wanted to bring grandma's giant furniture and put it in their tiny homes. We had one lady who taught piano and had a baby grand piano, and she wanted to be able to pull the house around and give music lessons with a baby grand piano. She tried to give me a deposit and I refused to take it. My wife screamed at me and said, how can you make a decision what's good for her? You know, but we have to be able to, as a builder, be responsible and really look at people, listen, and help them understand what living tiny is all about. You know, as time's gone on, we've developed a understanding you don't have to live like a monk to live in a tiny.
Right.
And you can have most of what you want, but you have to clearly define what you want and need.
Yeah. And depending on where you're going to be putting that tiny house and kind of what stage of life I think that you're in. All of those questions would come into the factors as well. A person who's living high up on a mountain, kind of in a remote area, is going to have a different lifestyle than somebody who's dragging it around the country.
Agreed.
Yeah. Excellent. Love all of that. So what would you say is the number one thing you want all tiny housers to know? And I think that's a really broad, really difficult question to answer.
Well, the very first one, as I just mentioned, is understanding yourself, your lifestyle, and where you're going in life, and making sure you're clear, which a lot of people never achieve in their whole life. So, but we're here to help them understand that.
Yes.
Then the next factor that's most important is what you deal with the most. Foundation. In life, foundation is utmost importance, from relationship to livelihood to where you're living.
Yeah.
And so having the proper movable foundation that accommodate the dream that you have is of utmost importance. And here's a plug for you. TrailerMade understands that. And they're building the platform for that. Getting the clients to understand which platform is appropriate. Is it going to be one axle? Is it going to be four axles? Am I going to have all grandma's china in that house?
Right.
Or am I going to be a minimalist? And the foundation will dictate how you can live. So you need to know that to start out with.
And we asked that question too. Like, are you the person that is going to be moving this a lot? Are you going to be taking this around the country? Or, do you have a job that has you relocating a lot? That's super important. Or do they have that kind of idealistic dream that they're going to drive around the country? Because we see that too, where there's this romanticism about moving it around, and then they move it one time and realize how stressful that can be.
This goes to a flashback from when I first started building tiny homes. Back then, Jay Schaefer, I had, I think, a 12-foot tiny home, long tiny home. And, oh gosh, I'm forgetting the name, up in Portland, the lady who had a really small tiny home. They were the two most famous back then.
Yeah.
D. Williams, right.
Yeah.
Up in Portland. So back in those days, most people that came to us thought they were going to be pulling their tiny home around, and they were going to be a vagabond gypsy with their home. And as time has proven out, that's not the case. People come to us and they think they might do that, and I have to help them understand. So now our clients, they take their tiny home someplace and it stays there.
Yeah.
Only a few of our clients have moved them.
Yeah.
So back when Jay Schaefer and them and they had those small tiny homes, my first tiny home was 24 foot long. I actually got hate emails and phone calls that I was destroying the movement by building such a large tiny home. And now, as I understand, over 65% of all tiny homes are 24 foot and above. So we've become more realistic with what we need, and that living in a tiny home, you can't do without the things that make your life pleasurable during the day. And you have to have access to the things you need to enjoy life and to go recreate and go skiing and hiking. And you need to have that there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember, building that first one for you that was 24 foot and at the time thinking, gosh, this is really big. And I remember the first 28 foot that we built and thinking, man, that's just humongous. And now it has evolved over the 10 years. We've watched them go from the standard being 16, 20, 24 foot to being more 28, 32, 40. We build foundations now that we never would have built in those first few years. Just as the tiny house industry has evolved, so has the sizes. I think because people are recognizing, living in a 16-foot box is challenging. And it's not about going without. or at least it shouldn't be about going without. Living tiny is not about that. I don't feel. I think it's about having more in your life. More in your life, not more stuff in your life, but more in your life. But there are things that you need to have. There's things you need to have to be comfortable, to be able to live that life. So sometimes I'm astonished at the sizes that people ask for from us. Wow. Okay.
I have to talk people down often.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But you're right. Now there's a lot more 10-foot wide
Yep.
now, tiny homes. And 10 by 34 is a very common size now.
Yeah.
The first one I built that large, I walked into it after we framed it and I go, oh my God, what am I going to do with all this space?
Yep.
We filled it up real fast.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, us humans, we're like fish that way. You give us a bigger box, we'll fill it up. It's just a fact. Okay. Well, I love all of that. But we do want to talk about the big mistakes. And I know you've got some in mind. And so we'd like to hear, what do you think, what are those top 5 mistakes that the DIYers make?
Okay. After choosing the right movable foundation would definitely be planning and development of your design. I see so many tiny homes that people have built that are disastrous because they didn't really understand what it takes for a strong home. I draw up all the plans by hand first and I pass it on to an architect. And so it's engineered and it's architecturally appropriate. And you can't cut corners there. Bottom line, you can't use a 2x6 as your beam that's going to support your roof. You need a 4x10 or a 4x12. That ridge beam is important.
Yeah.
I see people use 2x4s for a ridge beam. You got to do it right.
Yeah.
Bottom line.
Yep. I often say, just because it's a tiny house, that does not mean it's a tiny job.
Oh, no, not at all. It's more of a job.
Yeah.
Because there's other factors you have to be concerned about: hurricane winds and earthquake when you pull it down the road. So you got to be strong.
Yeah.
So choosing the right building materials all the way down to sheathing. I won't use OSB on an exterior. I use nothing but zip system because it's 30% stronger than any other ply for sheathing. And when you're going down the road, you want that shear strength. Sure, you're only going to go down the road every once in a while, but you've got to survive that trip.
Yeah.
And so choosing the right materials, choosing the right windows. If you're going to buy the cheap windows from Home Depot and you're living in Colorado, you're going to spend a fortune heating and cooling because it's not going to seal it right. Choosing the right siding, interior. You don't put drywall in there because it's going to crack.
Right.
So choosing the right materials is of utmost importance, and evaluating weight factors in that as well.
Yes.
And making sure your plumbing isn't going to freeze instantly, because in a traditional home, plumbing is on all interior walls. We don't have interior walls.
Right.
So you have to choose that and do it wisely.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. So that's 3. I think that's 3.
Correct.
What are a couple others?
Well, insulation.
Yep.
As we grew up, my age, I'm 71 years old. There's a lot of houses in Florida that didn't have insulation. There are houses in New England that didn't have insulation. They used dead air space for insulation. People typically would use fiberglass batting insulation for homes throughout 50s on to now even. But in a tiny home, that's not going to work.
Right.
Most people frame with 2x4. You have to use a high quality closed cell foam, not a cheap quality one.
Right.
And if you don't do that, you're not going to achieve the insulation that you have to. Which brings me to a point. I've been working with the state of Colorado on a new tiny house law for the last year and a half. And just in the last 2 weeks, we've defined what has to be used as insulation.
Okay.
And you will not pass the energy codes if you used anything other than a high quality closed cell foam.
This was 6 and 12.
Yeah. No, we're going to be able to have 2. We're going to have 2x4, according to 2 weeks ago. we'll see what happens on Tuesday's meeting.
Ah,
So we got past a lot of energy codes because of the insulation that the test dummy is using.
okay.
The person who did the test for the state.
Okay.
She's no dummy. She's your salesperson.
Ah,
That did the test on one of her houses.
nice.
And I believe we're even going to get by with 2x4 rafters. Maybe, we don't know that yet.
Okay.
That's on an 8-foot wide house that has a ridge beam, not a shed roof. Otherwise, you're going to have to go to 2x6 or 2x10. It's only going to happen if you have a really high quality closed cell phone.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Okay.
And that also is included being placed in the trailer. And the trailer is going to need probably 5 to 6 inches
Okay.
of foam from what we have developed so far in the rules and regulations. That has not been set in concrete yet.
Okay. And that will, I mean, obviously that information is shared with us, and we currently do spray foam in there. So that's a good thing for us. That's a good thing that we're on.
Yes, your trailer was designed from the first day to be able to handle that with that metal pan underneath.
Yep.
There were trailers that didn't have them back in those days.
There's still trailers out there.
Yeah. For people.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. And what would you say is the last one that I think is super important?
If you're having trouble, don't be bought into your ego. Say, oh, I could do it the way I want, blah, blah, blah. Consult with a professional. We have a lot of do-it-yourselfers come to us. We have rescued people that were, oh my God, their house was a mess. It's much better to consult before you get to that point.
Yes.
I saw someone who had a ridge beam that had 3 2x6s butted together, nailed together end to end. And they thought that was going to be good. And they came to me, well, how come my roof is sagging?
Oh boy.
Year and a half later, they tried to sell that house to me. And I just said, we had a conversation about this, didn't we? So rely on the professionals. And I'm talking about the true proven professionals. There's a lot of professional builders out there that are allegedly professional, and they have good websites and they have a good rap, but that doesn't mean they know what they're doing.
Right.
Go to someone who's built a minimum of 10 houses that are still holding up. So don't go to someone that's a shade tree tiny home builder.
Yeah. And that's one of those things I think that we encourage people to do is to do lots of research and to talk to people. If there's a specific builder that they're, looking at, to talk to them a lot, see if they can get references from their customers, talk to them. That's really important because, we're not exactly in the wild, wild west of the tiny house industry anymore. It's evolving. But with that, there's a lot of room for people to be taken advantage of, unfortunately.
On that note, when I say go to a professional, I'm not talking about the tiny house online forums. There's a lot of the tiny house online forums that have these know-it-alls that I can't believe has ever walked into a tiny home. And I see horrible advice on a lot of those forums. I used to be extremely involved in those, and about 5 or 6 years ago, I just had to walk away because I'd be saying truth and there'd be a bunch of know-it-alls that just said, you don't know what you're talking about, but they did. Not that I know everything,
Right.
but I've built a lot of houses. They're all standing. I've only done 5 service calls out of all the houses we've built. So we might have a clue, I think.
Pretty amazing track record.
I hope so. I think so.
Absolutely. I believe you do. I mean,
Yeah.
We hear from people, people call us and ask us questions. We love being a resource for people, obviously. You know, I don't think anybody that is passionate about the tiny house industry, I don't think any of us want any of our customers or clients to fall into those pitfalls of being.
I would like to say that, Natalie. I'm going to go out on a limb, but there's a company in Colorado that's trying or allegedly selling houses for less than what I could build them for, just in materials. They have not delivered houses to people, but they're still taking orders.
Scary.
They're in lots of trouble with the law. They have big internet and TikTok presence. And I get so many calls from people crying.
Oh.
And so you have to evaluate what that professional truly is.
And I think that, you know, one of the things I grew up is, you know, knowing and hearing is if it sounds too good to be true, probably.
Yep.
Probably is.
How come Simblissity sells that house for $125,000 and so-and-so sells it for $45,000?
Yeah.
And
we encounter this with trailers too. You know, we get people on the phone. They're like, oh, I could get it somewhere else, you know, so much cheaper. Like, well, comparing apples to apples here, is it, you know, and this is the foundation. You know, you don't want to build your whole home on something that's not solid. Then all of your hard work is for naught. You know, like you said, everything starts with that foundation. So you got to make sure that that's right and that that's solid and that that's protected and that it's exactly what you're needing for your home to go down the road or to be parked in a place for a long time. You know, it's that important. And just because something is cheaper does not make it the right product. Doesn't mean that that's the best choice to go with.
now, just because that's all your budget can afford,
Right.
doesn't mean go for it.
No, I mean,
You know, so
wait a few months and save up some more money.
or a few years.
Or a few years.
Right. So, you know, that something just occurred to me when we were talking about materials. A lot of people have come to me wanting to use recycled materials. I'm an old recycle guy. I love using things like that. But when you're building a tiny home, it's going to lead you to a miserable experience trying to match the sizes of 2x4s you bought from this junkyard or from this resource center or that, because they all come in different sizes. They aren't uniform. There's times in some of the big box stores, a 2x4 is not a 2x4 if it's 18 foot long compared to 8 foot. They can have different dimensions. And when it comes to using siding or used metal for siding, you know, you're leading yourself into a situation that's not going to be fun. It's going to take 2, 3, 4 times as long to build the home, trying to make it work. So buy new materials that are all matched in size. Yeah. Don't go and buy old barn wood that might have come from a meth lab or a horse trough, you know?
Right. And I think that if there are things in your home or some of the interior details that you want to incorporate, absolutely.
Then you could do that.
Whether it's a light fixture or a doorknob or, you know, cabinet faces. You know, we've seen some really amazing things that people have done with recycled materials.
Yes, I have too. I've done it.
The bones of your home, the foundation and the outer parts of your home, the parts that I think are the most important, those ones I think you absolutely can't skimp on.
Yeah. Never buy used windows.
Yeah.
There's a reason why they're used and not being used anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I thank you for sharing all of this information. You are just such a wealth of knowledge. Every time I talk to you, I learn new things. So thank you. Thank you. We did that already.
And thank you all for providing a good movable foundation.
Thank you very much. We are trying every day and out there and trying to do our best and improve and make sure that you guys have what you need for your building processes so that goes smoothly. You and I've already had that talk this year.
Excellent.
Yes. So I can't thank you enough, Byron, for everything that you've done for us and that you do for the tiny house industry. And why don't you tell everybody where they can find you?
We are Simblissity Tiny Homes in Lyons, Colorado. SimblicityTinyHomes.com. That's SIMBLISSITY. And we're 303-885-5991.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
And so back to the name. The guru said, if you live more simply, you gain more bliss. So I just decided I'd put people in an advantage with the bliss in their home to start out with. So just turned it into simplicity. Okay.
So that was an interesting interview that you had with Byron.
Yeah. I always learn something new from him. He always shares interesting facts and tidbits, and over 10 years, I've learned a lot from him. So it was a fantastic interview.
And opinions.
I mean, not fantastic on my part, because that was my first time ever interviewing. So, that was a little.
I think you did great.
Thank you.
You obviously feel differently. If you think Natalie did a great job, please leave a comment in the section below. We'd love to hear from you. She would love to hear from her fan base.
I will get better.
Of course, we'll all get better
Yes.
at this. What were your takeaways?
I think that one of the biggest takeaways was when he was discussing how intensively they interview people to, determine if living tiny is for them.
Yeah.
That I guess I didn't know how much time they spent really kind of diving into that with people. And I think it's great. I think it makes a lot of sense. So that was a big takeaway. And I think just the warning for people to just do their research, reach out for help when you need it. You don't have to try to do this alone.
Don't fall victim to scams.
Don't fall victim to scams. Yeah.
So many scams.
Yeah. So.
He had a lot of insight, I think, to offer on building materials, choices of building materials. It's very romantic to discuss building a tiny house and pulling it around behind you and making it all out of reclaimed materials. Yeah. Romantic is further down in the dictionary than realistic, isn't it?
Yes. I don't think that anyone who has pulled a tiny house behind their vehicle would ever put the word romantic in there.
No. Traumatic.
Yeah.
That's a word I've used personally, and I've moved hundreds now at least.
Yeah. It's exciting.
It's for those of you who think that this is a travel trailer, it is a mobile home. You can make it mobile and relocate it. But there's already a vehicle specifically for the purpose of going down the highway from weekend to weekend getaway.
Yeah.
And that's called an RV or a travel trailer,
Right.
fifth wheel. This is somewhere in the middle between a normal home and an RV. So make sure that your priorities and your dreams both align before you make this endeavor part of your life. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed listening to Byron. I've loved him and Dot both dearly for years.
Yeah.
If you guys are watching this, I hope you do, and I hope you enjoy it as much as we did making it. We're obviously a little embarrassed because we didn't get it out when we were supposed to, and it was a little rusty. We're noobs at this, but we're getting better, and we're encouraged. I think
we are running on encouragement in that we are going to get better and we are going to grow, and we are pushing away the discouraged feelings and persevering in this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you did great.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun, and like I said, I love talking to Byron, and I love Dot, and I just think they're wonderful people. We're really fortunate and blessed that they came into our life. So very thankful.
We love you both.
Yes.
Byron, Dot, thank you guys for everything. Thank you for being friends and colleagues in the tiny house industry. And we're excited for many more with you. Upcoming episodes, we've got Art from the Colorado Tiny House Festival. He's agreed to come on the show and talk about Colorado Tiny Fest a little bit.
Yep. Colorado State University. I think we're going to have an
Colorado
interview
State
with them.
University, that's right. The students, the program director, they're building a tiny house right now. This is Colorado State. Mines has done a couple of them as well, I
I
believe.
think so.
The Solar Decathlon. Anyway, we've got a lot of upcoming episodes.
Yep.
That we've been kind of
You get to do the next interview.
plugging away at. Everybody gets better with practice.
Yes,
So
we will.
Natalie's going to keep practicing. She's committed to do the next 10 interviews in a row. And I'm going to sit behind the camera and we'll have a good time watching Natalie's interview skills just grow and grow.
We'll see.
Thank you all so much for tuning in to the Tiny House Talk Show. We really, really appreciate you. We'll be back here in a week or so once we get some more editing done, get some more content out to you guys. Make sure you like and subscribe. And please follow us everywhere the socials are: Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, Apple Play Music, and wherever else you get your podcasts downloaded. So make sure you tune in again. We'll see you soon. Thank you.
See you next time. If you enjoyed today's episode and you want to hear more, please feel free to offer up any suggestions in the comments below for us. Please make sure to subscribe to our channel and like the content that you enjoy. It really helps us grow. You can also find us at trailermadetrailers.com and on Facebook and Instagram and wherever you download your podcasts. As always, thank you so much for your continued support.